The moving truck had barely stopped when Daniel felt eyes burning into his back. He had just unlocked the gate of his new lakeside home when a woman in a sharp navy suit marched across the driveway. "Welcome," she said coldly, "but you'll need to sign our HOA papers immediately or you'll face penalties." Daniel froze, stunned. He hadn't even unpacked, yet already he was being cornered. Her tone wasn't neighborly, it was commanding, like she was issuing orders. Behind her, two other board members stood with clipboards, ready to pounce. Daniel smiled politely, keeping calm. "I don't recall this neighborhood being under HOA control," he replied. The woman smirked. "Oh, it is. And you'll be paying your first set of fees today." Her voice dripped with confidence, as though she'd pulled this stunt many times before. Inside, Daniel's heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. He had done his research before buying this property. The land and the houses around it? He knew exactly who owned them. And if this HOA thought they could intimidate him, they were about to face a reality check that would flip their world upside down. The next morning, Daniel deliberately parked 3 of his cars in the driveway, neatly lined up, just to test the waters. Sure enough, within minutes, Karen, the HOA president, stormed over. "This is unacceptable," she barked, pointing at his vehicles. "HOA policy limits each home to 1 car. You're already violating rules before you've even settled in." Daniel leaned casually against his truck, hiding a smile. "1 car per house, you say?" Karen thrust a paper at him, filled with rules, fines, and warnings in bold print. "That's right. And if you don't comply, we'll take legal action." Her 2 assistants nodded eagerly, as if backing her up gave her more power. Neighbors peeked through blinds, some whispering, others rolling their eyes. Clearly, this wasn't the first time Karen had staged a dramatic HOA showdown. But Daniel wasn't like the others. He wasn't going to back down or apologize for rules that didn't apply to him. Instead, he folded the paper slowly, tucked it into his pocket, and said calmly, "Interesting. Let's see how this plays out." What Karen didn't know: Daniel already had a folder of legal documents in his study, documents that made her entire performance nothing more than smoke and mirrors. By the 3rd day, things escalated. Daniel invited a few friends over to help him unpack. They laughed, grilled food in the backyard, and enjoyed music at a modest volume. It was a normal, cheerful afternoon until Karen appeared again, this time dragging along a security officer the HOA had hired. She waved dramatically. "These people are not registered guests. They're trespassing under HOA guidelines." The officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly used to Karen's theatrics but still bound to listen. Daniel calmly stood, wiped his hands, and walked over. "Karen, these are my invited guests," he said firmly. "On my private property." She raised her voice, hoping neighbors could hear. "Not under HOA law." Daniel turned to the officer, his eyes steady. "Officer, do you want to see the deed?" The officer blinked in surprise. Most people flustered when Karen threw her weight around, but Daniel was prepared. He returned moments later with the deed in hand. The officer skimmed it, then frowned at Karen. "This property isn't even part of your HOA jurisdiction," he muttered. Karen's face flushed red, but instead of retreating, she hissed, "We'll see about that." Daniel knew this battle wasn't over, but soon, the truth would shine brighter than Karen's false authority. Karen doubled down. Flyers appeared on neighbors' doors overnight, warning them about Daniel. "New neighbor refuses HOA rules, expect chaos." They read. Whisper campaigns started, and some residents avoided eye contact when Daniel waved. It was classic manipulation, divide and isolate. Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he hosted an open cookout for the entire block. With warm food, laughter, and honest conversation, he slowly earned the trust of those around him. People began sharing their own frustrations, unfair fines, random fees, endless HOA restrictions. "We thought we had no choice," one neighbor admitted, "but you're standing up for all of us." Karen seethed as she watched from across the street. Arms crossed. For years, she had ruled with fear. And now, with Daniel's arrival, her control was cracking. What no one knew yet was the biggest twist: Daniel wasn't just another homeowner. He was the landlord. The one who actually owned the deeds to nearly every house Karen pretended to govern. And when he revealed that truth, her empire of intimidation would crumble in seconds. The breaking point came a week later, during an emergency HOA meeting Karen called in a fury. Daniel attended, sitting quietly as Karen rattled off accusations: too many cars, too many guests, violating lawn codes, disrespecting the HOA. The room buzzed with tension. Finally, Daniel stood. His calm voice silenced the crowd. "I've listened long enough," he said. "But before you continue, perhaps you should all know the truth." He opened his folder, laying out deed after deed across the table. Gasps echoed. Every property Karen claimed to govern, every single one, had Daniel's name listed as owner. Neighbors looked at one another in shock. Karen stammered, That can't be possible." But Daniel continued. Steady as stone. "It is. Which means your HOA rules? Your threats? They have no standing here. In fact, if we're talking about authority, I'm the one collecting rent." The room erupted. Some neighbors laughed in relief, others clapped, while Karen's face drained of color. Her so-called empire had been exposed as nothing more than a show. Word spread quickly. For the first time in years, neighbors felt free. No more absurd fines, no more warnings for things as small as mailbox colors. They approached Daniel with gratitude, offering to help with anything he needed. Families once silenced by fear now enjoyed their homes openly, but Karen wasn't done. She tried one last desperate move, filing a lawsuit, claiming Daniel had forged documents. It was bold, but empty. In court, the judge barely needed 5 minutes. One glance at the verified records, one look at Karen's flimsy claims, and the gavel came down hard. Case dismissed. Karen sat frozen in disbelief, realizing her reign was over. Daniel didn't gloat. Instead, he simply walked out, knowing the truth had done the work for him. His silence was louder than any victory speech. The neighborhood had been freed from years of unnecessary control, and all it took was one man refusing to bow to intimidation. Life slowly returned to peace. Daniel sipped coffee on his porch, watching neighbors walk their dogs and kids ride bikes without fear of violations. The air felt lighter, freer, filled with laughter instead of complaints. Some neighbors stopped by to thank him personally. "You didn't just stand up for yourself," one elderly couple said, "you stood up for all of us." Daniel smiled, humbled. He hadn't planned on being anyone's hero, he had simply refused to be bullied. As for Karen, she quietly sold her home and moved away, her once iron grip shattered beyond repair. The neighborhood she had ruled with threats now thrived under something she could never enforce: mutual respect. And Daniel? He remained what he had always been, not just a homeowner, but the landlord who held the power Karen tried so hard to fake. His calm strength had exposed the truth, and in doing so, restored freedom to an entire community.